What if your waking life is also a dream? And what if lucid dreaming held the key to mastering waking life? Blending Neville Goddard's teachings with neuroscience and mystical practice, Shveta explores why becoming aware is not the same as becoming the author, and why so many of us, even seasoned conscious creators, still feel surprised, stuck, or confused by our reality. You'll learn how dreams mirror your unconscious patterns, why everyone is you pushed out, and how that still applies even when you're shocked by what you see. You'll also learn 3 practical techniques to bring lucidity into both your sleeping and waking realities. If you've ever felt like you know the teachings, but still wonder why your outer world does not fully reflect your inner work, this is the conversation that connects the missing dots. To go deeper, join the School of Imagination on Discord. The invite link is in the video description. And if you're ready to train as a reality author and learn the mechanics of the reality simulation through a deep dive into simulation mastery, consider joining our next live cohort of Brave Mystic training, starting soon. Link is in the description. Let's begin this journey into the logic of dreams, the mystery of states, and the power of remembering who is really writing the script. This is DreamLogic.
So I discovered Neville Goddard's teachings in around 2017, and I kind of fancy myself as a consciousness researcher, and that's been something that I've been interested in since I was a kid, even before I learned about Neville's kind of framework on the role of consciousness in our reality. I always knew there was something to be said about that. I mean, I knew that consciousness played a central role in reality because we can't experience anything but through our conscious awareness. Nothing is relevant unless we experience it through conscious awareness. So it's been an incredible journey, both studying things from a metaphysical angle, from looking at scripture with this idea of it being a metaphor for who we truly are, that our consciousness is actually ontological, meaning first cause. And then also looking at it from a scientific framework. And what I noticed is one of my favorite types of manifestations that actually pay so many dividends for me in terms of how I manage my life and see this reality around me is manifesting answers to like my most deep burning questions. So Neville had a very airtight and incredibly detailed explanation of how reality is created by our states. And there's a lot more, there's still a lot of gaps. I mean, if you think about the mysteries of life, there's still a little gaps and little things that can essentially be rabbit holes. And I love to fill those rabbit holes. I love to fill those gaps that we see, even though Neville's framework was really complete. There's still so many questions that I had just being in the state of the seeker that I've always been. So that's where a lot of the programming that we put together comes from. And so in Brave Mystic training, there was, and I shared this in, to the cohort, there was a moment of time where I had gotten to a state of questioning if everything is me pushed out, why are there still so many surprises? And there's this like topsy-turvy experience you can have even when you know that imagination creates reality and you get you really get this like solid understanding of who you are logically. There's still this topsy-turvy kind of like explanation that your experience rather that you end up having. And what I went to the end, so this is how I manifest answers, and I really recommend you try this anytime there's a mystery that confuses you, is when you presented with a question or a confusion, you go to the end and feel this. sense of relief. Oh, I get it now. Oh, that's what it is. I get it now. And there's been countless answers that I've gotten like this that just completely resolve for the question I had and up level my understanding of things. And so it's really exciting. I recommend you try that. And that's what led me to what I want to talk to you about today. And so, what I want to talk to you about today is essentially the idea of lucid dreaming as a framework that is incredibly useful for conscious creators. So, Neville talked about dreaming, so this world that we live in being a dream that we're dreaming in concert. And, from a Hindu perspective, so many thinkers describe this reality as a dream, as an illusory experience that our consciousness is experiencing, but it's illusory, it's a dream. And so I essentially had this aha moment where I realized, okay, I need to explore lucid dreaming and explore that because it has a lot of answers about, to kind of fill in a lot of those gaps I was just, alluding to from Neville Goddard's teachings, and also explain essentially how we can live in such a mysterious world even when it's all you. And so I want to start by posing a question. So, have you ever had a moment where you've woken up from a nightmare or just a really crappy dream or scary dream, and then you feel that sense of relief? And you feel this sense of relief. You're like, oh, thank God that wasn't real. I'm sure we've all had that where we're experiencing this dream. It felt extremely real at the moment. You're gripping. It's completely gripped you. And then you wake up in a jolt and you have the sense of relief. Like, thank God that wasn't real. I'm sure we've all experienced that. And then if you have been exploring Neville's teachings for a while and conscious creation in general, you might have asked yourself and wonder, okay, why was that even on my mind? I know that when I dream, it's my subconscious matter or what's going on within me that I experience in my dream. But what even was that? Like, what was on my mind for me to experience that? Because so many of us, and I'd love to hear from the chat if you can remember a recent dream that just boggled the mind. Things that are pulled up from our childhood or things that we don't even realize that we were thinking about that come up in a dream. And within the dream, it was so convincing. There might not have been logic or reason at all in the dream. In fact, sometimes it's devoid of logic and reason. One minute, you're driving, the next second you're, in bed, or the next second you're going to school with no pants on, and you're doing, you're at the exam and you can't get to the exam room no matter what. My mom always tells me about dreams that she has that are horrific. I guess being traumatized by the Indian school system, where she can not get to her exam room on time or forgot her exam schedule. But what I'm getting at is, in the dream, you were convinced it was real. Your emotional experience, your emotional reaction, all of that was a reaction because you felt it was real.
I do think it is convincing, yes, but I also, as I hear you say that, I'm also thinking, I didn't bother to question it. Yes, it was convincing, but it was also unquestioned.
Yeah. So in the moment, so when you say you didn't bother to question it, are you saying that after you woke up?
No, inside the dream. Like inside the dream, I didn't bother to question what was happening. It's like,
Actually,
right? Yeah.
that makes sense because it's happening and you're so enthralled in it. You're like your full, emotional inner senses are involved in it. It's almost like you don't have the time or you don't have the wherewithal to question it because there's so many scenes happening. It's very gripping scenes,
Yeah.
one after the other. And these gripping scenes are happening. You're swept up in it because it feels so grotesque or intensive. It's like a full body experience. And, some of us can remember dreams pretty well. And I want to talk to you a little bit about how you can start to remember more dreams. And we're going to get into a lot more detail here. And others forget the details of the dreams. But sometimes when you wake up, you feel that, like at the very moments where you wake up, you feel just how entrenched you were in that dream. And then there's the sense of relief. Oh, thank God that was just a dream. And yeah, I see some example. So Kathy says, as a kid, I would try to go from the garage through through the door of my house, but someone was pulling my arm and I couldn't get into the house. So it's funny that you say that, Kathy, because in my research of this, a lot of the dreams that people have, the nightmares, it's like this disconnect from being able to do something, being able to open your eyes, being able to lift your arms, things that you know you should be able to do, but you aren't able to do. And that's what's a terrifying part of it, is that you've been disconnected from something that logically you should be able to do. And it absolutely, it's terrifying because it grips you. It doesn't even have to be a nightmare in the way that nightmares are typically explained. You know, a nightmare where there's a monster, or you know, something really tragic happens or something horrific happens. Those are of course very gripping. But then there's just nightmares or like horrific dreams where you just can't do something. You can't open your eyes. You can't seem to get to the right room. You can't open the door. It's this extremely strange and gripping experience that doesn't need logic or reason in that moment. Sarah says, right, disidentified on some level. Yeah, you're kind of like, well, in the dream, you're identified with the dream, unless of course you practice lucid dreaming, which we're going to get to. You're sort of identified with the dream, that you're not even questioning it, and you're disidentified on some level with the awakened version. So the awakened version of you that knows, okay, this door is going to open. Doors open. That's what they do in reality. That version of you is kind of gone, and but it's still you in the dream. It's just another version that is incredibly identified with the dream. Kathy says, and then I would be so relieved that it was not true. Exactly. There's that sense of relief when you wake up. Phew, that was just a dream. I have to say, one of my favorite Rumi quotes, which I'll put in the chat in the next minute or two, essentially he's paraphrasing and he's saying, you know, when you experience life and we experience so much grief and suffering, and then when you wake up, you're going to be laughing at yourself that this was just a dream. You know, you took it so seriously, but it was just a dream. And so that quote always stuck with me for such a long time. And now that I've explored dream mechanics and lucid dreaming, which by the way, lucid dreaming is a scientifically valid phenomenon that has been explored from a neuroscientific perspective on all angles, and also has practitioners for decades now that are exploring lucid dreaming. So it's not, you know, in the category of what scientists would even call pseudoscience. You know, it's not. It's actually a well-established phenomenon that happens in consciousness that neuroscientists and practitioners are still trying to make sense of. And so having read some books on this and a bunch of articles and, you know, gone through tons of forums of people practicing this, I think it's a really cool framework for conscious creators. Because as Neville said, and as these mystics said, this reality that we exist in is also a dream. It's a different type of dream. It has more persistent qualities, and it's not fully solipsistic, meaning in your dream, when you're dreaming, when you go to sleep, that, you know, that is fully you pushed out. That is fully only you pushed out. There's nobody else that's in there, no other fractal version of you that you're interacting with, that is fully your character pushed out. I sort of see the dream space as a mini version, and even like smaller fractal version, I guess like a mini version of what's actually happening in our waking state. And I want to talk you through more of that shortly. Ariel says it could be even an invitation to explore inquiry of wakeful life even more. Exactly. I see it as an invitation, and it's a daily experience that we have. Every night we go to sleep, there's dreams that happen in some subset of our sleeping. So we go into this like experience where we're experiencing dreaming life. And for some reason, you know, majority of humanity thinks, that was just a dream. Who cares? It kind of begs the question of, are we leaving something on the table here? Are we leaving exploration on the table here about what reality is and what consciousness is if we're not exploring this crazy world that we seem to get into, this crazy world that you create so effortlessly and that you're still shocked by every night? Are we leaving something on the table here? Ray says, we're limitless. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I love what you're saying there. Are we leaving something on the table? That's so I've been I've been exposed to this idea of living a 24-hour life. Have you heard of this?
I
So
haven't,
it
but I think I understand where you're going with this.
you get it, right? Yeah. So it's like instead of, oh, for 16 hours a day I'm living, and then the other 8 I'm not living, meaning I'm like not here or not conscious, just dream like. And I'm not just speaking literally. I'm also speaking like, oh, we just don't care or place any importance on what happens in those other 8 hours. Living a 24-hour life is a framework where you start to approach your entire experience of being conscious, of being consciousness in a body, and experiencing, both the waking reality and the dreaming reality as two parts of a cohesive whole. Instead of fragmenting off the sleep part and thinking that that's something separate, you actually start to see your entire life as a seamless thing that's just being lived together. And so from what
Incredible.
you're saying, yeah. So what you're saying about, are we leaving something on the table? Yeah. If we're not viewing our consciousness in a 24-hour perspective, I think we are leaving something on the table. I think we're missing, 3/4 of the picture.
It actually reminds me of the Roald Dahl book, Big Friendly Giant, and the Big Friendly Giant makes a funny point. He's saying half of you humans, half of your life is spent dreaming. I mean, sleeping and dreaming, and so really you're not living at all. So he's making kind of an opposite point to what I want to say here. But it's something to consider that if we are sleeping and we go to all these different worlds, and these worlds are created by our consciousness, as conscious creators, what can we learn from that world that we descend into every single night, that our consciousness is awake but in a different dimension, with different rules, different logic? What can we learn from that we can then bring to this reality? It's like a training ground in some ways. And so the fact that we live in a reality where neuroscientists and lucid dreamer practitioners have put together an abundance of research, books, anecdotes, and techniques, like it completely opened the sort of like opened the can of worms, but also like the Pandora's box, and just made me realize, okay, this is a lot of interesting data reference points that we can then make sense of the mysteries of why our reality is the way it is. We might know, okay, everyone is you pushed out. We might start to understand some of that framework. We might start to make sense of it, but we're still confused. We're still thrown off. We're still surprised. Why? I think dream logic, which is what I'm calling this lucid dreaming framework brought to our daily experience. I'm calling that dream logic. And so I had there's a question that Kathy asked: would Dr. Joe Dispenza's the field, the nothingness, be the same as a lucid dream? So the lucid dream that you experience is an expression of the void, the field, the nothingness. It's just another expression, just like how this reality is an expression. But any dream that you're in, like, that's also an expression. So it's not like the sort of nothingness that you're talking about, the field, that is on some level the part of the sleep that you have where you don't dream. It's almost like a dreamless sleep where it's just potential. It's just a void. But then when you're actually dreaming something where there's scenes, like stuff that you're seeing, people you're interacting with, interactions and experiences and feelings you're having, that's the expression of that. Instead of taking it just from potential space, you're experiencing it as a hardened reality. Now, in the lucid dream, it's hardened to your awareness in that, and it's not really quote unquote real. Of course, when we say what's real, that's a whole other explanation and definition. But yeah, hopefully that sort of answered your question there. And Josiah, I appreciate you putting the definition here. So a lucid dream is a dream in which one is conscious that one is dreaming as the dream is occurring. So exactly. So we dream every night. And turns out there's a small subset of people that actually get lucid in their dreams pretty regularly, meaning they're in the dream and they realize, oh, I'm dreaming. That's an automatic skill that some people have when they're dreaming. And then there's practitioners that teach you how to become conscious. And there's all these techniques that they teach you how to become conscious when you're dreaming, because they've discovered there's a ton of benefits to this, ton of benefits to exploring your consciousness in dreaming. So they might not be, conscious creators the way we are, meaning they might not, connect the dots to creating your own reality in this planet, on this waking world, I mean. But they've put out together a ton of information about how to become, number one, lucid, because, in your dream, like, hey, I'm dreaming right now. And then number two, authoring and controlling your dream, because those are two different ideas. Those are two very different skills. So something to consider there, that becoming awake and realizing, oh, I'm dreaming, that's one skill set. Authoring and controlling, a completely other skill set. That's what I started to learn when I was doing this research, that it's completely different. So something to consider when you're dreaming is that it felt extremely real. You were totally convinced, unless you were lucid, you were totally convinced that it was real. And even scientists have to agree that every person in that nightmare was you. Everything that you experienced, every emotion, every interaction, it was actually you. It was your mind in costume, your own mind, all the different layers of your subconscious mind and your conscious mind and everything that makes you pushed out. It was your mind in costume. It was your own fears playing dress up, essentially. Every conversation you had in your dream was your unconscious talking to itself. Any attack that you experienced was you wrestling with yourself. Any feeling of betrayal that you experienced was you abandoning yourself, just with another face that you pushed out in the dream. And unless you became lucid, you forgot that you were the author of the entire experience. That's why it felt so real and gripping to you. And I believe that that's exactly what's happening in our waking lives. In our waking lives, that exact same dynamic is happening. So Sarah says, waking life and sleeping life as a whole, exactly. I love what Josiah had to say about the 24-hour life, 24-hour living. That makes perfect sense to me, that we wouldn't want to leave the fascinating insights that we get from lucid dreaming on the table. Ariel says, I love that framework. I call it living a universe in a day. Yes. It also ties into presence. When the next moment arrives, it'll be now. So why not be embodying wholeness always? So embodying wholeness is becoming lucid and recognizing, oh, those things out there that I'm afraid of right now, that's actually me. I'm dreaming right now. So Josiah says, lucid dreaming framework brought to daily experiences DreamLogic. Exactly. We're taking what these practitioners and scientists have put together in the framework they've put together, the techniques they've put together, the understanding they've put together, and then we're bringing it to this daily experience where we're dreaming in concert, as Neville put it. And yes, it does make sleep time fun and adventurous, like going on a trip every time you lay down at night. And, you might think, well, what's the point? A lot of people might think, outside of the space especially, oh, what's the point? When you go to sleep, that's not even real. Let's say you have a fantastic dream and you wake up and you realize, oh, but that wasn't even real. The truth is that any given experience that you have in your reality, if you look at, you're not quite sure. You don't know if it's real or not ever. You know what I mean? Like, what is reality? If consciousness is the only reality, then our experiences are only ever an expression. So, something to think about there. Skill 1, becoming lucid in the dream. Yes, that's the first skill, becoming lucid in the dream. And skill 2 is authoring and controlling the dream. What's really interesting is, turns out that when you become lucid in a dream, that actually authoring and controlling can become harder. So what I mean by that is, let's say that people were flying in their dream. They were just flying. They didn't even think about it. They were just flying. Soon as they became lucid, oh, I'm dreaming. That ability to fly became more difficult at times. It's kind of like when we start to manifest stuff that we were able to do automatically. When we start questioning it, wait, am I creating? It's almost like a performance anxiety that comes.
So I've experienced this, Shweta. So I want to share my perspective on this. So when I become lucid, so there's like one dream in particular where I became lucid, and I was like, oh, I'm dreaming. Like I'm literally in my bed right now. I'm dreaming. I confirmed it, and I think it's probably too early in the conversation to talk about how to confirm that you're dreaming while in a dream. And then I got excited. And it was the excitement that destabilized the dream. And that's kind of a rookie mistake, but I couldn't help it. I was just experiencing excitement. So it's like something about that emotional current
Mm,
destabilized. I also want to point to language. Language is so important, especially since this is the pilot and we're kind of setting the tone for future conversations. And Marcio's pointing it out as well. I think it's important not to call it real life. I
mm,
think it's important to call it waking reality
I like it.
and dream reality or sleeping reality.
Let's call it sleeping reality
Sleeping
and then
reality. Okay.
waking reality. I love that. Yep.
Waking reality, sleeping reality. Yeah.
And the reason we
Perfect.
want to do that is because both of them are dreaming. Neville said we're dreaming in concert in real life. I mean, not
Yeah.
in real life, in waking reality.
Yes.
I love doing this with you guys because you solidify the ideas, and I
Yeah.
think this is incredible. So that makes perfect sense. So sleeping reality versus waking reality, both are real, both are dreaming, just different levels of dreaming. So I think that's fantastic. Great point. Exploring says, seems like it is important to keep sight of live in the end, as Neville would say. But I have found in this process there was a tendency for me to get too caught up with controlling the dream. Maybe it is part of the journey to just keep getting better at living in the end. Interesting. So going back to like vocabulary, the idea of control, that doesn't feel right to me either. Control. Or why would I? That feels like we're giving the power to maybe one or two things in the dream, and whether it's waking or sleeping, right? One or two things in the dream, and then putting your focus out there, and then that becomes ineffective anyway. And so, really, we're deciding not to control the dream. What we're doing is taking the awareness that we are dreaming and putting that focus on our awareness and shifting the state in our awareness. So let's kind of get a little deeper here. So just to kind of bring the science into this. So lucid dreaming actually happens during REM sleep. So it's like you can think of it as like metacognitive awareness during REM sleep. It doesn't happen throughout your entire sleeping experience. It happens to a very specific time. And for us to have healthy cycles of sleep, we need to enter REM sleep. It's a very important part of our health, our conscious awareness, and our health. So your prefrontal cortex, so the part that's responsible for self-awareness and executive function, it lights up when you're in that state, when you're in the dream state, in your sleeping reality. And you develop what scientists call thinking about thinking. So metacognition, the same part of you in waking reality that's sort of conscious starts lighting up as well. Your conscious mind observes and evaluates the dream while you continue experiencing it. And so that happens, and then when you essentially like when you become, oh, I'm actually dreaming right now, that's when you're lucid. And what's really interesting is it turns out that even with full lucidity, most dreamers have a hard time shifting the dream to experience what they truly want. Because and it's bizarre because you would think, oh, I'm dreaming right now. You would think that would make it easier to shift your state to create something different. But what's really going on is the dream content that you're having in sleeping reality is still being generated by unconscious pattern making systems. So those deep assumptions, emotional associations, stories, trauma patterns, all the programming. So what I mean is that you've become aware. You've become aware. Okay, I'm dreaming right now. And you becoming aware that you're dreaming right now doesn't automatically cancel out or overcome deeper assumptions, deeper associations, any stories, the inner conversations. That's only part of the picture. I think
That's
that's important to know. Like,
so important what you're saying right there, Shweta. That just because you become aware that you're dreaming does not put you in the driver's seat of the dream. They're two separate skills. And I know we're kind of, brushing back and forth over this idea, but it's so key to understanding how dream logic relates to Neville's teachings. Becoming aware is the first step. It's like I put in the chat, it's like, oh, The secret tells you, hey, you create your reality with your thoughts and your feelings. Like, okay, cool. That's the first step, understanding that, right? Waking up to that. And then the second skill, a whole different set of skills, is actually learning how to now change things. So we're talking about in sleeping reality,
Mhm.
that sleeping world, when I wasn't aware that I was dreaming in a dream of sleep, in a dream reality, that world was being generated by something that was not my conscious mind. And now that I'm aware that I'm in a sleep reality, in a dream world,
Mhm.
it's still being created by something that is not my conscious mind. Okay, so you
Exactly.
said what that is that's creating it. Can you say that again? What is it that's creating it?
Yeah, so the dream content is still being generated by unconscious pattern making systems. What I mean by that is like the deeper assumptions, the inner conversations, these stories, the memories that you hold that you haven't revised. It's all there still. It's all there still. And they show up as dream characters that surprise you. You know you're lucid, you know you're dreaming, but they're still dream characters that surprise you. Because they're emerging from deeper layers of your psyche that your conscious mind doesn't always access. And I mean, as practitioners of conscious creation, we're getting better at that, right? Like we are more aware than the average person about the contents of our consciousness, as Neville would put it, the states that we occupy. And there's always more to know. There's always more. And that's why a surprise element can even happen. And these dream characters, according to lucid dream practitioners, do they play a really important function. So the people that you experience in your reality, the things and the people, they teach you things you didn't know, but you did know. It's almost like a mirror. You didn't know, but you did know. And they seem like they're behaving independently, but they're not. They're just coming from this unconscious material in your mind. That could be your deeper assumptions, stories, inner conversations, memories, not the conscious intention, not that readily available version of you that's observing, but that deeper version of you. Is that making sense?
I follow.
See,
Yes, I'm kind of note taking in the chat here to
yeah,
help it land. Yeah,
that
I
makes
love
sense.
what you said about, oh, I didn't know the character's teaching me, but the character is me, so I did know. Like like the deeper part of me knew, but my conscious mind is learning.
I think that's important to be aware of, because I see a question from Sarah. Wouldn't the dream world shift as soon as I have decided to be lucid right here and now? What what science has found and what practitioners have found is becoming lucid, it actually does shift the world in that you reframe your reality to realize that these might be this is an experience coming from your mind. It does not automatically reduce the fears, reduce the surprise, reduce the confusion. That is a whole other skill set. And the reason for that is there's still so much unconscious matter that's showing up in your dream that you can start to shine a light on. In fact, that dream, the lucid dream process of, oh, this character came and scared the heck out of me. This monster came out of the closet. Or, I failed my driver's test. Like random things that are happening are fantastic ways for you to shine the light on that unconscious matter. So lucid dream practitioners, like they're able to see, okay, I became conscious of the fact that I'm dreaming. That didn't automatically make it so that only the conscious matter can has say over the dream. Actually what it did was make me aware of, oh, these are the unconscious things that are going on deeper within me, these unconscious stories that I've been holding on, and kind of gives you some material to work with there. So it's like you're aware that it's all you, but you're still often shocked by what shows up. And if you've studied Neville and you've practiced Neville's teachings, I think this should be very familiar with, for you, because logically you've read the books and you've experienced this in different ways that everyone is you pushed out. You experience it in different ways that, okay, I thought I did have this state. And yeah, I do experience it roughly, but it isn't a one-to-one experience often. You're like, I never thought this though. I haven't thought about this in years. You're still confused about, like, okay, you create your reality, but you're still feeling triggered by your boss. You're still spiraling maybe over, relationships, and you're still waiting for the scene to change. So that's equivalent to me. That's equivalent that of the person that's becoming lucid in their dream, but unsure how to shift states to experience other portions or solve for their unconscious patterns. So, like I said, becoming lucid is one part, and there's some techniques that lucid dreaming practitioners teach you on how to do that, which I think I would love to share with you today. And then there's a second portion of it of what lucid dreamers learn of how they can then shift states and create another lucid dream. Take a nightmare and shift it, because a lot of lucid dream practitioners, they actually they got into it because they were experiencing recurring nightmares. And they were tired of the recurring nightmares, kind of like we in the waking reality are tired of the same old thing happening. We're tired of the same old thing happening in this dreaming of concert. So we learned about, conscious creation techniques. In the lucid dreaming world, people were tired of having like crappy nightmares, right? And wanted to be able to shift out of them. And so it becomes a very analogous process, if you can see where I'm getting at here. Ray says, with consciousness creating matter, could it be a combo effect where subconscious limitations and matter forming delay? If we assume the makeup of what we see without our eyes is a form of matter. Oh, yes. Okay. So Ray, as a part 2 of this conversation, this is the pilot. Part 2 of this conversation, I'm going to go more deeply into the difference between your sleeping reality and your waking reality. Both dreaming, but the difference in the feedback loops and the different in sort of the dynamic. There's a ton of similarity, which is what I want to start with here. But I think in part 2, I'll start to construct the difference and why there's that delay that you're saying. And, because we do experience the world or the seeming appearance of physical matter, and we are sharing a dream that is more persistent, that you wake up to in waking reality every day, that seems to have a temporal beat to it that lucid sleeping reality does not have. In sleeping reality, you can feel like you're in you're time traveling backward and frontward. It doesn't have that same structure. So I'm in part 2. I'm really excited to get into that. And so that's what I wanted to start with, to say that lucidity is not the same thing as authorship. Just like becoming aware that, hey, everything is you pushed out. That's one part of it. And that can totally shake you up, and that can loosen up some of the assumptions to start with. And that's awesome. But then becoming an author in your reality, in your waking reality, totally different skill set. And you need the first bit. You need to become lucid first, but then experiencing your life as like the true author, that's a whole other skill set, because it's a deeper level of awareness that you have to get into. And so I wanted to share with you something that Neville said about dreaming. He talked a lot about our waking reality dream. He said, this is a world of death, and everyone here is dead, dreaming the dream of life. In the beginning, we all agreed to dream in concert, and no one has ever violated that agreement. And so it's important to note here that, yes, he, very directly said, we are dreaming the dream of life. But he didn't say that, we're experiencing the dream on our own. He said we're dreaming in concert. So you can think of this as a coordinated creation dream. Like a dream in our waking reality, we're dreaming in coordinated creation. So essentially what he's saying is that before incarnating into physical reality, that all consciousness, as we were descending upon this reality, on Earth, we agreed to share the same basic physics engine, the same rules about time, space, and the seeming world of cause and effect. And so we're playing by shared parameters, so the game makes sense. Like I said, I'm going to go more deeply into this next week. So what I can say now, though, is think of this as a massive multiplayer dream. If you play video games, you can think of it as a massive multiplayer dream where everyone agreed to the same operating system. the key to know here is even within that shared framework, your personal experience still 100% your projection. It's still you pushed out. So in 1969, Neville explained it in this way. He said, right now, you think this room is real. But if to dream is to dwell in unreality, not knowing it as such, what is life but one uninterrupted dream? So what he's saying there is waking life and night dreams are like waking reality, right? And sleeping reality are made up of the same substance, consciousness creating apparent reality. The only difference is processing speed, matter density, social consensus. So we'll talk, like I said, next week we'll get more into the detail. So we dream in concert, and yet in this reality, that in this waking reality, everything is still you pushed out. So neuroscientists studying dreams have confirmed this. It's not like this is something we're putting together without their confirmation, that everyone is literally you pushed out. Because think about it, there can be, when you're sleeping, there literally is no other consciousness. So every character is a fragment of your psyche in costume. And even scientists don't debate this. So in the laboratory of your own skull, everyone is you pushed out is a very, it's almost like the most direct experience you can have of that. And when you dream, the reason I'm kind of being repetitive with this, I want us to start thinking about this. We go to sleep every night, and most of us dream every night. In fact, all people who have like a decent, healthy night's sleep will experience a dream. How much you remember of it is different for each one of us. But the dream characters, they're not choosing anything. They're not choosing their behavior. All they're doing is responding to the psychic material that you have within you, right? And your emotional state within the moment. So this is scientifically proven in dreams, and I want us to start thinking that our waking life operates in that same way. Yes, we might see characters we don't understand. That's okay. We might see characters and people that respond in ways that we don't understand. That's normal. That's okay. Why? Because we have levels to our consciousness that we aren't aware of, we're not privy to until it shows up as Sarah from work, or, your mom saying something to you that you don't like. Those are expressions of levels of your awareness that you're just not privy to. Something to think about there. And I find it really fascinating to have learned this, that a lot of lucid dreamers apparently have a difficult time learning to author their dreams because they're trying to control. We talked about the word control and how control, it doesn't feel right because you are giving the power over to a couple of details in the dream and sort of over focusing on them. So lucid dreamers have to go through the same exact experience. Yes, they're conscious. Hey, I'm dreaming. They're conscious of the dream, but they have a very difficult time changing that unconscious state, generating it. And research shows that even expert lucid dreamers often have the same recurring nightmares for decades. And that's because the conscious mind that recognizes, oh, this is a dream, isn't the same level of consciousness that's creating that dream content. Again, it's different levels of and layers of consciousness in dreams, which I think explains a lot as to, again, why we can be shocked, why we can have recurring experiences, even if we've studied Neville for years. And really, that's what I'm passionate about, is to help people who could write an essay, a dissertation, a PhD on Neville's teachings and know it inside and out, and still experience recurring nightmares in different areas of life. I want to take it to the next level to say, yes, you are lucid. You get what's going on. And now let's explain why that's it's a kind of a gap between that and authorship. So Faraz asks, what about all the wars around the world? Is it your own imagination? And if that's the case, what would be an individual calling mean on this earth? Is it possible to stretch imagination for global solutions? Or you saying we're supposed to just be with no meaning to exist? So this is a question I struggle, I'm not going to say I struggle with, but I have, that I've asked myself for years, because one thing I needed to understand is, what is the role of suffering on this planet? Why do we suffer? Why are there horrors on this planet? And it's not something that it took me, and it's still something that I grapple with and make sense of, because Neville would share that in this waking reality, horrors persist. It's a part of the thematic experience of the waking reality. And if we look at, what we're talking about today, it's coming from deeper layers of all of our consciousness, layers that we're not even aware of, layers that we are starting to become aware of because we see, hey, that's me pushed out. There must be something rooted within me. So to answer your question, and I see some, Josiah has also answered something beautiful there. To answer your question, if you are disturbed by wars in the world around you, and this is something I had to swallow, that there is something rooted within each of our consciousness that we share that has projected that and is experiencing that. It's a feedback loop. And yes, it is possible to stretch imagination for global solutions. I actually do that regularly, and I see dividends. I see experiences that show that I'm like, whoa, my shift actually seemed to make a shift out there. And when you think of your personal reality and your personal dream, my goal is to take the horrors of my personal dream, meaning my personal problems, the people in my reality, the people that I experience in my day-to-day basis, and start there. That's what I've realized is the most sustainable for me, is to start there with the people and the loved ones around me. Yes, I do certainly try to shift states for things that are beyond that, but I start with the people around me, because that is the most personal level of my dream, and that is the most sustainable level for right now. And I'm gonna read Josiah's comment here. If war appears out there, it points to a deeper collective imagination rooted in fear, separation, domination, and powerlessness. Your individual awareness may not have imagined bombs or politics, but if you accept fear, powerlessness, or victimhood as your operating state, you participate in a resonance that feeds it. Yes, exactly. Something that I've had to swallow and accept. Mystically, Earth is a shared dream, a field of co-authorship. The chaos you witness reflects humanity's unresolved inner war, the war between the true self and the false identity. So yes, in that higher mystical sense, war is an outer echo of inner dissonance. That is very true, and that is exactly why I've decided that my role is to work on my personal bubble of reality in this waking reality. And, because what I noticed, I would get extremely swept up by wars, by politics, by honestly things like factory farming. They would push me out of my state because it felt so big and so intense and just so beyond my power. But what I started to do was get really personal in my personal world of how I could eradicate those states within me and see the shift within my personal world. And in fact, there's a Hindu story that I absolutely love that talks about that. If we have time, I'll share about this. Ray asks, do those same dreamers have trouble authoring with control association in their waking life? Makes it sound like extracurricular training ground. It's very interesting you bring that up, Ray, because those lucid dreamers might not realize the mechanics of conscious creation in waking reality. What they're trying to do is experience lucid dreaming in sleeping reality, but they might not really know. Maybe they've not come across these teachings. They might not know. I haven't, that you can do that in your waking reality. It would be very interesting to see that connection, and that's something I just noted down to research. What's the overlap of lucid dreamers and conscious creators that take those teachings from lucid dreaming and experience it in their waking life. Ariel says, I like the reminder that everyone as you pushed out can invite compassion for the parts of self we don't yet understand and haven't yet fully encountered. Exactly. That's what's going on when you're sleeping. So it turns out, and neuroscientists back this up, that because it's all you pushed out, but you're still surprised by it, lucid dream practitioners say this is a perfect way a perfectly valid and helpful way to start resolving those issues that you have in your consciousness. That dream is material for you to become aware. Oh, that's in my consciousness. Okay, let me start resolving this. Because awareness is half the battle. You become aware that you're dreaming, and then you become aware, oh, this is all the material that's in my consciousness. I never knew. I never knew. That's why people get so shocked about their dreams. Oh my God, I was dreaming about doing this and dreaming about doing that, and that almost disgusted me. Well, sorry to break it to you, that disgust you're experiencing is coming from that conscious mind, but what you saw there can only ever come from the material within your subconscious mind. So that disgust as a reaction, maybe we can shift that to authoring something different. Okay. Orlena says, isn't it free will? And that's why there's horrors? Yeah, there's always a free will to choose a state, and there's unnumbered states. And in our sleeping dream, and this is a William Blake quote, I don't want to keep butchering quotes, but William Blake talked about how we have unnumbered states that we fall into in our waking and sleeping reality that we then experience and we call it real, but it's not. So what is real though is the free will to choose a state. So, okay. So it turns out that, as I was mentioning, lucid dreamers often have the same recurring nightmares for decades because that conscious mind that recognizes, oh, this is a dream, isn't automatically the same level of the consciousness that has all that dream content brewing under. So really, those emotional patterns, unresolved trauma, and archetypal programming, those like assumptions and inner conversations and the deeper things that are going on within you is pushed out. It's pushed out into your dream and becoming visible for you. And now your conscious awareness is noticing that, experiencing that, and that is true in waking life as well. You know, this happened to me. You know, I had tons of beginner's luck with Neville's teachings. I knew every one of Neville's lectures, did state akin to sleep till I felt like my eyes were going to bleed. I affirmed till I was blue in the face. But if my nervous system was still running childhood programming, I was still experiencing versions of that wounded frequency in different costumes in my life. So really, I think this is important here that lucid dreamers have realized, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about the practices that they do, that yes, visualization is an excellent technique. Affirmations are great techniques. You know, thinking differently, different inner conversations, great techniques. And those have to come from they have to penetrate that deeper version of your consciousness, the deeper layers of your consciousness by changing the state that's generating that reflection. So I want to talk to you a little bit about some advanced lucid dreaming techniques, okay? And some of them are, actually, I'll start with basic and then we'll get to the advanced. So the first technique that lucid dreamers teach is this idea of assumption testing or reality testing. It's actually reality testing, and we're going to talk about what reality testing is. So lucid dream practitioners, what they tell you to do in your waking reality, they tell you to ask yourself, am I dreaming right now? Multiple times a day. They ask you to say, am I dreaming right now? Like really question that to yourself. Like meaning, once we're done with this call, lucid dreamer practitioners would say, okay, now you ask yourself, look at your hands. That's what they would say. Look at your hands, look at your clock, question your environment and ask, am I dreaming right now? And really ask that question. You might think, no, I know I'm awake, but they're asking you to actually question that. Am I dreaming right now? The reason you do that is once you create that habit in your waking reality, in your dream reality, you might get to that point once you become the habit seeps in to sleeping reality. In sleeping reality, you could then be like, am I dreaming right now? And then you would look at your hands, you would check your clocks, and then question your environment. That questioning helps people become lucid in their sleeping reality, which is really cool to consider. So Josiah, before I jump into this, I know you've actually practiced lucid dreaming before. Have you ever had experience with this technique?
Yeah. So I did a training. It's like more than a week long. I did a retreat where the whole purpose of the retreat was to practice becoming lucid in dream states, and then also what they call astral projection or out of body experiences. And my teacher, he handed out those little clickers, like a people counter, if you're like standing and like counting people walking through a gate or something. He handed out, everyone had one of these clickers. And we were supposed to click it every time that we did what he called a reality check.
Mm-hmm.
And so the idea was to reinforce how important these reality checks are. And again, coming from the perspective of living a 24-hour reality, the whole idea is that when you create a habit in your waking reality, it will carry over into your sleeping reality. So throughout your day, you're constantly, every, like I would say probably 2-3 times an hour. He told us how many times, when we got to the end of the day, how many clicks should be on our clickers. But it came out to like 3 or 4 times an hour. You're supposed to do this reality check. And the idea is that you really get in the habit of doing it. And then you fall asleep and then you're in a dream. And then here comes along the habit of, oh, I need to do a reality check. Only this time, the reality check indicates you're sleeping and dreaming and you're not in waking reality. And so that's what unlocks. Unlocks the opportunity to do other things in your dream reality. So yes, you pointed the hands, the clock. You pointed out the hands, the clock, and also light. So if you put your hands behind your back and you shake them, and then you hold the hands out in front of you, and you count your fingers, there should be 10. And then if you do it again, you put your hands behind you, you shake them, you put them out in front of you, there should still be 10. And what lucid dreamers have found is that if you are in a dream reality, oftentimes you will have 11, 12, 6, 8, some number of fingers that is not 10. So that would obviously be a clue. The second thing is to look at the time, and the time should make logical sense to you. And then you should look away from the clock and then look at the clock again. And the time should be the same, right? It should all make logical sense. And then you also compare that to indications of time of day. And then also another technique is to try to change the light level. So if I wonder if I'm dreaming, one thing I could do is I could get up and walk over to the light switch and flip the switch. And a lot of times in a dream, the ambient light levels will not change. Because what are you going to do? Turn out the lights in your dream? Like that makes no sense. Right.
And so what you're doing there is, okay, in this waking reality, there's some persistent rules, right, that we've descended into, which is, okay, when physics, let's say, the laws of physics, there's some persistent rules that we have that do not translate over to sleeping reality. So what we're doing is checking, hey, are these rules in play in my sleeping reality? Oh, they're not. So that must mean I'm dreaming. So that's what's really happening there is you're doing these checks that become habitual. And then when you're sleeping, that habit kind of comes over into the sleeping reality. And then you do that check and say, oh, I must be in sleeping reality because it's not consistent the way it is in my waking reality. And so it's interesting because it made me realize that this is something that we can start doing in waking reality as well. So maybe one of the techniques could be using a clicker and maybe using an alarm to ask yourself, instead of asking yourself, am I dreaming right now? You can ask yourself, what am I assuming right now? What am I creating right now? And this is something I started to play with, and I realized just how often I was getting. So in the same way that you would use this technique to become lucid in the sleeping dream, I started realizing just how often I was getting caught up in the waking dream. By using this very technique, I just repurposed it from, instead of lucid dreaming into waking dream, I said, okay, let me use this. I had like a rubber band around my hand. And every so often I would use the rubber band and smack it and say, okay, what am I assuming right now? And even if I think to myself, no, I'm lucid, I know what's going on, I'm a Neville student, it was shocking to me how often, Josiah, I had become swept up by the visuals of my dream. In the same way that a lucid dreamer who's trying to become lucid in their dream, in their sleeping reality, could get swept up with the contents of their dream, we are doing that all the time. So I think it's great if we can start repurposing that technique for real life. That's the first technique, and I think it's going to be something that I would really recommend you try. So what I would recommend you do is every 2 hours, put a little alarm on your phone. What are you assuming right now? And then You can do a little smack, or you can have a rubber band that you every time you look at the rubber band, you could snap it on your wrist and ask yourself, what am I? Kind of bring yourself back to what am I assuming right now? I think many of us would be shocked, like I was, how often I'm getting swept up with this extreme, like high definition dream that I'm living in waking reality. And then it was a great, it was a great reminder to shift to what I desire, to shift to my ideal, and become aware of, what the heck I'm thinking right now, and it's something very important that I thought would be a great beginner technique. So it's a beginner lucid dreaming technique, but it's something that we can bring to our waking reality as well. Okay, the other technique that lucid dreamers start using when they want to become lucid is dream journals. So one of the basic things that you need to start doing when you want to become lucid in your sleeping reality is as soon as you wake up, you have a journal right next to you, and you write down what you can remember about your dream, all of the details. And then the reason you do that is it actually increases your capacity to remember your dream next time, and it helps you recognize any recurring themes, symbols, and characters. So I've always said this because it's something that I think we forget, meaning in reality there's so much going on, so much data and information that we get exposed to, that we can often forget. First of all, we forget our successful manifestations. We forget our success, like our inputs, like what did we actually desire, and the specifics of what we desire. It can get kind of fuzzy to us, and we can get confused about like various things and themes that happen in our real life. So the same way that lucid dreamers are encouraged to have a dream journal so that they can increase the capacity of their of remembering what was going on in their dream, and then look at the themes that come up in their dream. Let's start doing that for our waking reality. I see this as a non-negotiable thing, non-negotiable tool, that if I did not have a journal that went through all of my either successful manifestations, the things I scripted a long time ago, I would have gone off this path many, many times when I was in a state of forgetfulness of who I am. So I really recommend that you have a journal, that you journal every single day, and anything and everything can go in that journal. Things that you desire, themes that you see that happen in your life, your success stories, that little, big, little, medium, and big, emotional states that you experience during the day, and then you could even use them as revising journal. Really, the takeaway here is very important to have a journal. So I'm going to go up before I go to the next tip, some questions, and I'm going to answer these a little quickly because we are kind of at time, and I have a couple more things I want to say. But so we talk about war and struggle. I wanted to say that I have an idea, a seed of an idea that I've talked to Josiah about, where I want to talk about the truth and the dark side of this reality, meaning, okay, we talk about conscious creation and we talk about that, and it can be very love and light and, a little bit of spiritual bypassing. But part of the reason I'm attracted to these teachings and I'm interested in them is to better understand why there are horrors in the world. Why does war even happen? Is it because of collective thought, as Erlina asks? Is it because people are thinking about wars? Like, at what point is it your bubble? But it's all connected. And so I certainly have had those questions, and that is I would like to let you know that's something that has been on our hearts and our minds, at the School of Imagination, and we would like to either have another radio hour or some kind of program or maybe something that goes deep in this, because I've been doing research about this for years as to what it is about our reality that seems to make horrors such a persistent experience. And now the other thing I'd like to do, I'm putting this in the chat right now, is a story of in Hinduism that explains why your personal world is a great place to start when you create your reality, and why that personal world is actually an expression of the full world around. So that's what I would recommend reading that if you can before you, because just like Neville would share the Bible as a metaphor for states and a metaphor for essentially conscious awareness, and who we truly are, the scriptures of all religions can be viewed that way as well. When you read the scriptures literally from different religions, they can be quite scary and confusing. But when you read them from a Neville lens, oh my God, they've completely transformed in meaning. Um, this is a good example of that. The other technique that I think is important here. So we talked first about, this, what we call, you can call it a rubber snap technique, or just essentially asking yourself, what am I assuming right now? What am I assuming right now? What state am I in right now? Just every so often, so that you can make that into a habit and bring back lucidity in your waking reality. The second thing we talked about was journaling, because when you pattern track, you basically have a bigger capacity for memory, remembering who you are. When you pattern track, you remember who you are more. You have more awareness of those things. You have less shock. You have less surprise about what goes on in your reality, because you are more aware of the themes and symbols and characters and things that you've been thinking about. So that's the second one. The third one is interesting, because turns out that lucid dreamers are taught to set clear intentions before they sleep. They're taught to say to themselves, I will become lucid and remember I'm dreaming. So I will become lucid and remember I'm dreaming. Now, in this case, this is a funny way to look at it. When you wake up, you go from sleeping reality, sleeping dreams, to waking reality, waking dream, right? So the same way you go from sleeping, before sleep, lucid dreamers are setting their intention. Before you wake up out of bed, I recommend, and this is something I would like to, I'm going to start doing more consciously, to tell yourself the intention, I will embody the feeling of my wish fulfilled. I will embody my feeling of my wish fulfilled. And you can even say, I am embodying the feeling of my wish fulfilled. However it feels right for you. The reason I say that is that intention in lucid dreaming actually works. People in lucid dreaming become lucid and remember that they're dreaming. That's a technique that actually works. So why wouldn't that work? If you every single day set that intention. Today, I am remembering the feeling of my wish fulfilled. I will let my unconscious reorganize my reality. I put this prompt. I will embody the feeling of my wish fulfilled. So I think that's something that we sometimes forget. Sometimes the simple techniques and the simple ideas become something that we're like, oh no, let me make this complicated. But those simple intentions, they work in lucid dreaming. I certainly think that they're worth trying in waking reality. Okay. Let me see if there's any other questions or thoughts. Okay. Nice. So something to remind. So I want to make sure that this, because we covered a lot of ground here today. The main takeaway here is, other than the three sort of like techniques I just shared that you can learn and kind of implement right away, is that just because the characters in your reality, like meaning your 3D reality that you experience, surprise you, shock you, offend you, does not mean that's not a good enough logic. That's not good enough logic to say, okay, maybe the world isn't me pushed out. Now you know, even when people are sleeping, when in their dreaming in their sleep, and literally no other consciousness could possibly be writing their dreams, they're still shocked. They're still confused. They still have, they still experience nightmares. Even when they're lucid, they experience nightmares. So this should be very affirming to you that me getting surprised, me getting shocked, me getting offended by what's going on in my reality around me, that's not evidence that that's not me pushed out. That making sense? Before, I might think, oh, that surprised the hell out of me. I don't think I've ever thought that. So that I didn't create that. I might have thought that means that this world must not be me pushed out, that this waking reality must not be me pushed out. Now I realize, oh no, that is not a good enough logical deduction. I didn't think that. I don't understand that. I'm offended by that is not a good reason to sweep away this idea of everyone is you pushed out. Do you see why that's the case here? Ariel says, wish list suggestion for School of Imagination branded spin tops or rubber bands. I think that's a really cool idea. Clickers, something. Those little tools make it really easy for us to. It's because it's like tangible. Joseph says, you set the intentions during the hypnagogic and hypnopompic states. That's really cool. I've never heard of hypnopompic. I need to write that down. That's really interesting. Josiah says, the image of this in my mind is hilarious. What's on your wrist? Oh, just a smack yourself band I got from the School of Imagination. Yes. I think that these simple things become habitual. That's the powerful reason for that. Like a powerful anything that's habitual becomes a part of your consciousness really easily. And so you don't have to, it doesn't take an enormous amount of conscious effort. It just because once it's a habit, it's a pattern in your consciousness. Josiah says, Gogic is falling to sleep. Pompic is waking up. Super cool. So that's what I want to pose to you today. If you're sleeping and your consciousness can fractal itself into apparently separate dream characters that surprise and shock you, why couldn't it fractal itself to apparently separate waking characters? Now that's done and dusted. Now I know that, just because something shocks and surprises me, confuses me, doesn't feel real to me, that doesn't mean that it's not me. So I think that's very helpful, useful, and I hope that was useful to you too, because really it's not about making sense of, where did I think this? Well, why did that come up? It's about recognizing that is me, and what are we going to do about it now? What state are we going to shift now? Because that analysis paralysis that I used to have, that's gone now. Now it's just, oh, okay, cool. Unconscious material being pushed out. Where do I go from here? It helps us not spiritually bypass. Marcio says, playing devil's advocate here for a bit. How does the shocking and surprising aspects of life not posit against everyone is you pushed out? So what I'm saying here is, if in your dream, which scientists agree, even scientists agree that in your dream, it's all you. It's nothing else, right? It's all of your thoughts that you have. It's your subconscious mind that has all these memories. It has all of this material. And even in dream state, you're shocked. You're confused. You're like, that doesn't make sense. You have recurring nightmares. You are not aware of why, this is happening. You have a difficult time extricating yourself from the dream. If that's happening even in a space like dream reality, where even scientists have to agree that it is just you, right? If that can happen what makes us think that in this shared dream, right? Like if that can happen then why couldn't it happen in waking dreams? So what I'm saying is, even in spaces where scientists agree that is definitely you get shocked. In fact, you're so shocked. You have nightmares that make no sense. So I guess what I'm saying there is, that's analogous to this waking dream. It explains why you can be shocked by things in your waking life, even if it is still you. So, right, but assume I don't believe this. Like, when you say assume I don't believe this, assume I don't believe this. Believe what? Carrie says, unless you go out of body, that is not necessarily you. It might not be necessarily you as like your character of like Shveta or Carrie, but it's another fractal expression of you. Like when you go out of body and you're experiencing other beings, at some level, it's another expression of you. It's not Carrie, it's not Shveta, because you're going out of body and you're experiencing other characters, like kind of like in this waking reality. It's not like Shveta that's like I'm speaking to. Like when I talk to Josiah, that's Josiah. But what I experience of Josiah is me pushed out. Because Josiah, at a higher level, we all are one consciousness. We're one consciousness that is being expressed through all different levels of reality. Assume I am a person that doesn't buy these teachings. Then, okay, so that's the thing, is that we are, the part that scientists do agree is that when you go to sleep, right, that you're experiencing you, right? And Neville asks us to think about it like, okay, if we're actually living in this waking reality, and in this waking reality, this is a shared dream where we are dreaming in concert. So I'm taking the dream mechanics of sleep, like dreaming, like how lucid dreaming works, and I'm applying it to the waking reality, which we're taking a leap of faith here, meaning if we believe everything is you pushed out, and this we're dreaming in concert, which is why we're here. We believe that, then it explains why we can still be shocked and surprised in this dream, in the waking dream of how this works. Now, it's funny that you say that. Assume I'm a person that doesn't buy these teachings. Do you know that there are still people out there that don't believe that lucid dreaming is a thing? Even when neuroscientists have validated that, when people, when the phenomenon is so well documented and there's practitioners, there are still people I came across that were like, this is baloney, this doesn't make sense, like you can't get, your dream is just your dream, it has nothing to do, like they don't buy it still. So I will say that like skepticism as a state can absolutely shut you off of things that are, even when they're proven, if you know what I'm getting at. Like things can be proven and people will still be incredibly skeptical about it. It's really bizarre. So it would be hard to sort of like convince somebody, if you know what I mean. No, it's all good, Marcio. I see what you're asking, because I think I'm going to take this away a little, because I think I understand what you're asking, which is how does this prove that the people around us are us pushed out? Well, what we're doing is we're taking Neville's and the other mystical teachers in history. We're taking their perspective that this is a waking dream. So in the same, that is not what neuroscientists say, right? Neuroscientists don't say, "Oh yeah, this is a waking dream." Some thinkers believe that we live in a simulation, which for all intents and purposes, that's kind of like a dream, and neuroscientists, well, what they do have to agree with is that this reality that we live in, even neuroscientists have to agree that we only see a very small, narrow band of light. So we're not seeing the full exposure. We're seeing it from our own angle. You know what I mean? So anyway, let me take this away so I can kind of like make sense of this answer a little bit. But from a skeptical angle, I just wanted to say that a lot of skeptics have a hard time believing something they have not experienced before. So even when there are lucid dreaming practitioners that that seem to be able to control their dream, some people just don't buy it, which I found really fascinating. Anywho, this was such a fun time. Thank you so much for such a lovely conversation. I think it like went to all kinds of different like tentacles of different areas. If anyone has any questions, please reach out to me directly or to Josiah, or put it in the comments here, and reach out to us, because we're going to be making this into a series. And I've been studying this for a while now, not studying it as a practitioner, but studying it as a conscious creator. And there's a lot of juice here and a lot more techniques where that came from. And I'll put a little summary in the chat too, so that everyone can read that and have some good takeaways. Thanks, Josiah, for letting me hop on and share some of these ideas with you all.
Thank you, everyone. Have an awesome weekend. We'll see you in some of the next programming we have coming: Sunday Mystery School, the Mastermind, and Visionary Leadership next week. Until then, imagine wisely, my friends. And we'll talk to you all again soon. Thank you, Shweta.
Thank you. Bye.